This is Black History Month. The first celebration of this month took place in many of our lifetimes in Kent State University, I found out, over in 1970. Now, 6 years later, the month began being celebrated across the country during America's bicentennial. Every year, events are held, and we send our news cameras out to cover those events. But I've been wondering if we're really taking the time anymore to grasp the significance of Black History Month. It's not without its controversy, you know. No less than Morgan Freeman has opined against Black History Month, saying Black history, after all, is American history. Some others have decried the fact that it is only a month, 1 month. One of the bright young men of Toledo, media and technology entrepreneur Will Lucas, has received a great deal of national recognition. He is a member of the University of Toledo Board of Trustees, member of the Ohio Casino Control Commission, currently serving as the chairman of the Ohio Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, a podcaster, a tech entrepreneur. What do you do in your spare time? Like you have any. Let's start there, though, if we can. Well, and welcome in, by the way.
Thank you.
In our efforts to recognize and to celebrate civil rights pioneers like Dr. King, have we somehow revised history, somehow sterilized truth by making them something more or something of this shiny, clean celebrity?
Yeah, I think, you know, before we get into more of the hero worship that we do during Black History Month, we forget oftentimes that Dr. King wasn't necessarily a popular man in mainstream America when he was alive.
Had a lot of enemies.
He had a lot of enemies in the Black community. He had a lot of enemies in the Black church. He had a lot of
really
enemies. There wasn't a lot of pastors, you know, who were really down with the message that he was preaching. You know, while we talk about assimilation and things like that, right, he was very controversial. You know, towards the end of his life, when he started to talk about economics, that did not sit well with a lot of people. And so when we talk about this making him just a dreamer, Martin was very much about empowering the people as well.
Yeah. While this is, if you look it up, it's described as a celebration of African American history, and that's important to always remember our history, where we came from. But as I understand it, you'd like this month to also serve as a challenge, and one to be taken up today, currently. A challenge for whom to do what?
Yeah, I think, you know, I talked about, you know, a little bit of the hero worship.
Right.
And, you know, I think it's very appropriate to respect the people who have come before us and whose shoulders that we stand on. But also that Black history, as it is American history, and I do believe that, but we are still creating Black history. So this is history in the making for a lot of people. If you think about you just in modern times with the Black Panther, the whole phenomenon around the Black Panther movie, right, that was a 31-year-old director his first 3 movies are all in some ways blockbusters. He did Creed before Black Panther, Fruitvale Station before Black Panther. This is Ryan Coogler, 31 years old.
31.
And so and I can, you know, story after story of people who are present day making Black history. And so what I would like to challenge us to do is to not just think of Black History Month as a time to talk about Dr. King. And I look forward to a day when we are talking about more than just Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I use him as more of a category. So I put also in that category like a Rosa Parks.
Sure.
You know, people like that. So there is more to our story than just these, you know, people these giants of our history.
I love that history that continues to be written, correct, even as we speak. Do today's Black youth, do you think, do they get the amazing struggle, the dirt, the sweat, and yes, the blood that it took so many for so long to achieve at least the level of equality that we have today? So
I'd like to take a little bit of a different approach. I think we do still in some ways have that struggle for equality and still have that struggle for opportunity, but also that, you know, and I think, I hate to keep bringing up the Black Panther, but I think what's so important about this story is that we get to see ourselves in a different light, that it's not just about the struggle and it's not just that we've come from such humble beginnings, but also we are remarkable people as well, and we have, you know, created inventions and created sciences and technologies that people all over the world embrace today and use.
Do you think today's kids feel equal, or that the opportunity exists for them to achieve the very levels of things you're talking about?
So what's interesting about that question is, you know, I started the podcast.
Well, I'm going to get you there. I want to get you there.
So I don't want to get in too far in front of you, you know, but I think what's important for us to do is to highlight those people who are making progress for us today, people that we may not know their names. So while, you know, if you're asking, you know, do we feel equal, I think we would feel more empowered and more equal if we knew about the accomplishments that people were making today, and it's not just 30 or 40 40 years.
All right, and with that in mind, by the way, willlucas.co.
Correct.
willlucas.co. You've got to go there. You are a technology guru, and you have to understand that I'm lost on this stuff. So I look at someone like you and say, just wow. You decided to use your website to showcase some impressive role models in the field of high tech and elsewhere. And I love this, that you set out to produce a 10-episode podcast, and over time your expectations had to change, however. Tell me about that experience.
So I have a startup, and one of my advisors to my startup 3 years ago now asked me, we were just having a conversation. He said, you know, what would it take? He's not a black guy, but he said, you know, what would it take to get more, you know, kids in the inner city, black kids interested in tech? And I said, well, you know, they need to see a black Mark Zuckerberg, somebody who looks like them, is creating, you know, these massive levels of success. At the end of that conversation, I kind of kicked myself because I said, you know, well, we have super successful black people in technology, we just don't know their names. And so I did radio for a period of time, and you know, I said, well, let me use my skill in production and create a podcast to highlight prominent minorities in technology, and I did that. So because I have other things I said I was only going to do 10 episodes. That's why it's called the Of 10 podcast.
Of 10.
1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10.
OF10.
And be done. So at the end of that series, that first series, I said, you know, well, here it is world, and we're done. And the response on Twitter and elsewhere was such that I would have done it an injustice to only do one season. So 5 seasons later, we're still doing the podcast.
And that's twofold. There's a lot of work going on in there, but that also goes to, obviously, Will, the fact that there are so many people accomplishing at such a high rate out there. And it's through efforts like yours that we're all going to get to know them. Maybe some folks within portions of a community know them. Society, and especially the young people you're talking about, now get to know them.
I think it's important that we not only just wait for people to tell our stories, but that we find unique ways to, and because the internet is in the state that it's in, we can create ways to tell our stories in more efficient ways.
You've become friends with all these people, haven't you?
Yeah, that was a really cool byproduct of, you know, having phone conversations with these people for an hour and a half.
You want to give it's okay if you name drop here.
You know, I mean, there's people like, you know, Jason Maiden, who was one of the lead designers at Nike. He was the Jordan brand, one of the lead designers there, who's a friend of mine now. And we talk pretty regularly. He's just got funded by Magic Johnson and others to create a new sports line for kids designed for play. There's people like Rodney Williams, who's down in Cincinnati. He's on the chair. He's on the board of trustees at the University of Cincinnati now, 33 years old. He's created a technology which replaces Bluetooth audio over data over audio, and he's got deals with Land Rover and Jaguar. It's a black guy, 33 years old. And so people like Jessica Matthews, you know, Uncharted Power, she started off with Uncharted Play, which just created energy from soccer balls for people in impoverished countries who don't have stable electricity. So she created these toys that generate power. And so now she has a power company.
You ought to hear these stories, and you can. They're all on your podcast, right? Where is it at?
You can subscribe in iTunes. You can also, willlucas.co, and wherever you get your podcast, you can just navigate from there.
What areas, Will, we're going to wrap up here in our last minute. What areas, in what areas is the most amount of work still needed in your mind to fulfill Dr. King's dream? Remember that of people being judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin.
Well, I mean, I just like to see our young people be more exposed to opportunity, particularly when you're and I can only speak from the Midwest because I'm here. We don't necessarily see that people are doing extraordinary things. It took me moving to Atlanta to see young people, younger than I was at the time when I lived there, who were doing exceptionally well and weren't in the music business, weren't selling drugs, and weren't in sports. But they owned real estate, or they had their own companies, and et cetera.
They are achieving. And he's telling these stories. Check it out, willlucas.co and iTunes. My thanks to Will Lucas for joining us at the Leading Edge table and for the amazing work he continues to do right here in our community. Keep up the good work, young man.